As the Russo-Ukraine conflict nears its third year, US President Donald Trump's recent highly productive call with Russian President Vladimir Putin has set off alarm bells across Europe and Kiev as the two leaders move closer to negotiations to end the war. Fears are mounting that a deal favoring Moscow could sideline Ukraine and Europe, with Washington signaling a shift in its support and European leaders scrambling to secure a seat at the table. The key question remains: will Trump-Putin talks prioritize a balance of power between Washington and Moscow, or will Europe and Ukraine play a crucial role in shaping the war's outcome? This will be our discussion today in In-Depth. Stay tuned. The announcement of the recent Trump-Putin call made no mention of Europe or a significant Ukrainian role, fueling fears that their interests could be sidelined, according to Washington Post. The newspaper highlighted that Trump's phone call with Putin has deeply unsettled Kiev and its European allies, reigniting long-held fears that Ukraine could be excluded from peace talks determining its future and security, as well as that of the entire continent. The call, which made no mention of Europe, along with an upcoming meeting between the two leaders, has highlighted concerns among European officials that their defense interests could be sidelined if Trump engaged in direct talks with Russia. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov stated that it was premature to discuss Europe's role in any negotiations. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has continued to push for NATO membership or comparably security assurances. However, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth asserted that resorting Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is unrealistic. NATO membership should not be an option, and the presence of U.S. troops in Ukraine would not be included in any security guarantees.
US President Donald Trump announced a lengthy and highly productive phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, sparking fears in Europe that a peace deal could favor Moscow without Kiev's involvement. The call has raised concerns that the US and Russia might negotiate terms disadvantageous to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky insisted that Kiev would not accept a deal brokered solely by Washington and Moscow. However, Trump later spoke with Zelensky, discussing opportunities to achieve peace. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas stressed that Europe and Ukraine must be included in any negotiations, warning that their exclusion would undermine any potential agreement. Meanwhile, newly appointed U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth signaled a shift in Washington's stance by urging European nations to provide the overwhelming share of funding for Ukraine. Speaking at a defense summit in Brussels, Hegseth stated that the U.S. would no longer tolerate an imbalanced relationship with its allies and called on NATO members to increase their defense spending. He also asserted that Washington does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome. 7 European nations, including Britain, France, and Germany, have demanded a role in future talks. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov clarified that while Ukraine would participate, the US would act as the primary intermediary with Russia, adding that Europe's involvement was not discussed during the Trump-Putin call. As Trump and Putin push for a resolution, will the upcoming talks protect the interests of all parties, or will one side be forced to make sacrifices to end the war?
Right, so welcome back. And delving more into this, we're joined from Moscow by Mr. Sergei Markov, former advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Mr. Markov, if I first let me welcome you to Qnews and start by asking you, how will the upcoming Trump-Putin talks influence the future of the Russo-Ukrainian war, and does this imply that Europe and Kiev be excluded from the discussions, especially after the Kremlin spokesperson stated that Europe's involvement was not discussed during the Trump-Putin call?
Russia believes that there are no Russian-Ukrainian war because Ukraine does not exist as independent country. Ukraine is led by puppet regime, neo-colony regime, which has been created by United States, deep state, United States intelligence community, with coordination with British government and British intelligence service, and partly with European Commission. And that's why Russia believes that to make the deal between Russia and Ukraine impossible, senseless. The deal should be between Russia and United States. The problem is that Ukrainian regime depends not so much on President of United States. Zelensky, not puppet of Trump. Zelensky, puppet of CIA and Pentagon, and CIA and Pentagon are formally subordinated to Trump, but virtually independent from Trump. And so it should be a negotiation between Russian and American President Donald Trump. As about Europe, Europe is only for war. Europe only for killing of people. That's why Russia believes that participation of Europe in peace negotiation is bad idea, because it's Europe only can undermine peace negotiation. Europe, enemy of peace. Europe, only party of war. That's why it should be taken out from the table. Donald Trump also believes that Europe is not constructive. That's why role of the Europe in the peace negotiation could be negative. What could be discussion between United States and Europe? Not about peace, but only about war. Who will pay to Ukrainian army by weaponry and by money? Americans now say, look, we pay you $1, we should stupid. If Europe want to continue its war against Russia, you Europeans should pay yourself.
We're joined now by Mr. Maxim Yali, Professor of International Relations at the State University Kiev Aviation Institute. Good afternoon to you and welcome to Q News. Let me ask you first your response to Mr. Sergei's statements, and also after the new U.S. Defense Secretary stated that Washington does not believe NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome. So could the direct negotiations between Trump and Putin lead to peace deal that sacrifices Ukraine's territorial integrity or NATO aspirations?
So first of all, greetings to you. I know Mr. Markov for many years, and I know that he is a Kremlin propagandist. And the statements he has made, I was listening to them attentively. But you know, the statements of the President Donald Trump, the head of Pentagon, we are going to discuss now, absolutely contradict his statements that Zelensky is a puppet of CIA, etc. He doesn't change his narratives for 10 years since the beginning of Russian aggression. He's repeating them all the same, though already three presidents in US have changed. Why it is absolutely lie and contradicts the reality. So as you can see, the process of negotiations has started, and of course, Ukraine is not satisfied, and there is a big risks, and of course, we are disturbed that this process has begun without preliminary talks with Ukraine and Europe. I mean, common positions concerning the ways this war may be over. Donald Trump called, first of all, to Mr. Putin, and then to President Zelensky. And he is forcing Ukrainian side to make steps, very dangerous steps, for peace talks and possible peace treaty without any security guarantees. As we can see from the statements made by President Donald Trump and the head of Pentagon, United States want to shift responsibility for security guarantees for Europe. And of course, it is unacceptable both for European countries who also feel themselves in danger. And we can see it from today's statements of Ursula von der Leyen on Munich Security Conference and by prime ministers of Germany, France, and many others, because they feel in danger because they have no capabilities to protect themselves without United States. And therefore, of course, they understand they are at risk if, under such conditions, United States will push Ukraine to make a peace deal. It will not mean just and long-term peace. And Baltic states, Poland, I just give you a few examples, the politicians of which have expressed many times their threats that they can be the next. Of course, a peace on such conditions may just may be followed by the further aggression from Russia against European states.
Dr.
So therefore,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes,
So
continue.
therefore, so therefore, of course, we hope that it's just the usual tactics of Donald Trump
Right.
to ask for, I would say, unrealistic conditions, and then, like, as he used to make deals, to meet both ends, meet in the center.
Right.
But still, as I
let
have
me here-
mentioned, yeah.
Let me here take it to Dr. Markov and reiterate fears that Mr. Yali spoke about from the European side and fears for their future. And do you believe that the future of the US-Russia negotiations could pave the way for a deal that favors Moscow at the expense of Ukraine and European security?
Russia has demands to the peace deal, essentially very simple. Russia wants not to have peace break, but to have peace deal, stable peace. It means that Russia already signed Minsk I agreement and Minsk II agreement, and this agreement had been used by Western countries and Ukrainian regime just for the disarmament and for militarization of Ukraine and for the political repressions inside Ukraine against those who was support friendship between Ukraine and Russia. So Russia don't want to repeat same mistake which Russia already made with Minsk agreements. So what means stability? Stability means meaning that, first of all, the regime should be changed. And the changing of regime meaning that Russian language, which is language, native language for the 70% of Ukrainian population, should get official status. All prohibition of bans of Russian language should be get out, and Russian language should get status of the second official language of the Ukraine. then all political repression against Orthodox Church should be stopped. Also, all terroristic groups should be disarmed and prohibited. And main terroristic groups based on the Azov neo-Nazi battalion. Now it is already 2 huge corps. And the fact that Azov is a neo-Nazi group have been recognized by Congress of United States of America.
But
And,
Dr. Markov, here you did not answer or address what Dr. Yeli spoke of European fears and
oh no, yeah, it's just lie, frankly speaking. It's not European fear. It's just lie of European leaders, because European leaders want to continue aggression against Russia, as some of the European countries want to take some territory of Russia. It's how we regard. No any threat from European. Look, it's very simple. Donald Trump demanded European countries to increase military spending. You know this? This is one of the points for discussion. But European countries, many years, deny increasing of military spending. And same time they're talking about threat from Russia. Of course, they are lying. They understand that Russia is a peaceful country. They know it very well for themselves. They understand that there are no plans of Russian aggression against European countries. That's why European countries does not want to increase military spending as Donald Trump demanded for them. It's very simple. Everybody can understand this. Right. Donald Trump says them increase military spending. They say, no, we don't. We will not increase military spending.
Dr. Yari, what do you have for that or those statements? And in your opinion, given President Zelensky's insistence that Ukraine will not accept a deal brokered solely but by Washington and Moscow, how can Ukraine ensure its interests or ensure fair negotiations? And definitely first your take on Dr. Markov's statements, of course.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll start from commenting Mr. Markov's statements and show how Russian propaganda works. It's very obvious. So, number one, I'm a Russian-speaking Ukrainian. Nobody forbids me to speak Russian. Of course, I know Ukrainian, I know Greek, speaking English, etc. So it's completely not true. It's not forbidden to speak Ukraine. I come from occupied Mariupol, totally destroyed by Russian troops. My relative friends are killed, and my city, native city, is completely ruined, and I cannot get back there. Of course, I will be arrested at least. So that's and he's saying that Russia is a peaceful country. We're living in the era of internet, and everybody can see Google how Mariupol looked before Russian invasion and how he looks now, and after that, and how many thousands of civilians were killed there. And it was Russian-speaking city. Just all the territories occupied by Russia and totally destroyed are Russian-speaking, and they are killing Russian-speaking people who sympathize with Russia, who didn't expect this aggression, etc., etc.
Then what is according?
As for Europe, I'm just answering Mr. Markov, who doesn't follow the news. Just the quotations you may check. Yes,
the statement
for
Dr. Yali,
increasing. You asked me. I'm just answering step by step.
Please.
So,
no, I was just
going. Mr. Markov mentioned that European countries did not want and didn't raise their military expenditures. The quotation of Ursula von der Leyen's just speech in Munich conference. Before that, before full-scale invasion, the expenditures of European Union military expenditures were about $200 billion. For these 3 years, they raised up to $320 billion. And she has mentioned that it is definitely not enough due to the risks to the security coming from Russia. And she asked for European leaders to increase expenditures, military expenditures.
Now, if I may ask you here, then what could be the alternative, according to Mr. Zelensky's point of view, or how he viewed the negotiations from this point of view? What alternatives?
Well, alternatives, and the common position of European leaders and of Ukraine that Europe should take place in these negotiations, and the voice of Ukraine should be heard. And of course, as I have mentioned, we are ready for compromises. Of course, we are not ready to admit occupied territories as Russians, of course. And for President Zelensky, it will mean political death. But at the same time, we are ready, and we also do not want to freeze the conflict just as it was done in 2015 in Minsk agreements, Mr. Markov has mentioned, but he hasn't mentioned that Russia hasn't realized point number one, ceasefire. They have never done. And after the agreements were signed, they occupied Debaltseve in 2 weeks, which, due to these Minsk agreements, Minsk 1, belonged and were controlled by Ukraine. That's how Russia realizes their agreements. And of course, we do not want to repeat Minsk 3, because we understand that after they were signed and Russia violated and didn't realize, they were pushing us to change our constitutions. What was the last?
Right. Let me go here to Dr. Yeah. Let me go here to Dr. Markov. And Dr. Markov, your take on what Mr. Yeli said, and what are the challenges to achieve a lasting peace, and will any agreement truly address the root causes of the conflict?
This discussion a very good example of the general discussion, because you gave to Ukrainian side much more time than to the Russian side.
No, definitely did not. I just asked him to answer.
It's a matter of fact. It's because he's very aggressive. You give him more time because he's very aggressive. I understand. Yet you wanted to stop him, but was not able to stop him. No. It's one. Second, what we believe that Ukraine should not, in fact, take part in the negotiation. They can take part on the final stage, but not in negotiation, because they directly lie. For example, very good example, Russian language. Everybody knows that there are thousands of laws prohibiting Russian language, including direct prohibition using Russian language in the universities, in media in Ukraine, even in kindergarten now, and of course in schools. Everybody knows, but Ukrainian side usually just simply lie. And you give them auditories as another Western resources. So no reason to invite such kind of partner to a negotiation. They will be very irresponsible and will have negative approach. If you talk about peace deal specific, as I can repeat, the most important is that a change of Ukrainian regime. Western side even don't want to recognize that Western country killed Ukrainian democracy in 2014 by organizing the coup and overthrowing of last democratically elected Ukrainian president Viktor Yanukovych and imposing repressive regime. But this repressive regime is the key point. Russian military operation is humanitarian operation, not for taking territory. Russia is the biggest country in the world. We doesn't need new territories, but we need to save millions of people in Ukraine. 70 of them Russian speaking, 80% of them they Orthodox, and Orthodox church now crashed by Ukrainian repressive regime. Russian language is prohibited. Can you imagine what if we are talking, for example, to people in Arabic countries? Can you imagine that in Arabic countries it will be prohibited Arabic language. Do you agree with this? Save, it was a report of the Ukrainian citizens against this repressive regime. So Russian military operation is humanitarian operation. And we insisting that human rights of the Ukrainian citizen is key point. We should give back human rights to the Ukrainian citizens. And if it will happen, it will be real conditions for the stopping the war. If Ukrainian regime will be continue their terror against Russians with Ukrainian passport, Russian will continue this. It's humanitarian military operation.
That is the point of view from the Russian side and from the Ukrainian side. We tried as much as possible to be neutral and to give chance for both sides here, but unfortunately our time is out, and that was Mr. Sergei Markov, a former advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Maxim Yali, Professor of International Relations at the State University Kiev Aviation Institute. Many thanks for both of you and for your insights here, and I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.